Hello, this is the Longbox Review comic book podcast. I am your host, Eric. Welcome to the show. Today's episode is another pull list review, this time for June 2022 comics, the comics that I read during that month, and I read 36 of those. So these are the following comics that I read. I, however, am not going to be talking about all 36, just some of these where I have some thoughts about them. So these are roughly in order of reading. So I started off June by reading Love Everlasting number 3, then Glacier City number 2, Strange number 1, Wonder Woman Historia number 1, Justice League Incarnate number 1 and 2, DC Pride 2022, Batman Superman World's Finest number 3, Justice League vs. Legion of Superheroes number 3, The Marvels number 11, Nightwing number 92, Saga number 59, Something is Killing the Children Volume 4, which contains issues 16 through 20, Batman Creature of the Night number 1, Night Vale number 2, The Case of Alan Turing, Robins number 1, Spectators number 1-ish, and I'll explain that later, Reckless, The Ghost in You, Jones number 1, Hit Me number 1, Wonder Woman Earth 1 Volume 3, Dark Crisis number 1, Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, Green Lantern Earth 1 Volume 2, Valkyrie Jane Foster number 10, which I will just quickly say that was the final issue of that series, and this was during the great pandemic shutdown, and so they never published that issue in print, and I was getting it in single issue form, and so it has been available on the Marvel Unlimited app. I don't know for how long, but I refused to read it out of spite for a long while, and so. But I finally gave in and read it. So anyway, Sandman Mystery Theater numbers 29 through 32, Chivalry, and finally Legion of Superheroes number 36, which I read in preparation for the Legion Project podcast talk that Peter and I have done. So like I said, I have read all of those comic books in the month of June 2022. However, I will only be talking about I'll give you some general thoughts about some of these issues, or collections or graphic novels, as the case may be. I'll start off with Glacier City number 2, mostly just to tell you how much I love Jay Ferber's comic book writing. So I'm a huge fan of Mr. Ferber's comics. So when I found out he had a new series, and this is a while ago now, with Michael Montanat, also Simon Goh and Thomas Maurer, and so this was released on Panel Syndicate. And so if you're not familiar with Panel Syndicate, it is a digital comics website. It's a website that offers digital comics, but it's a pay as you want, pay as much as you want model. Even nothing. They provide these comics for free if you want. If you're, I guess if you're really, I was going to say something mean. Why would you not pay for these comics? But why would you not reward these creators with a little bit of cash their way for providing these great comics? So if you're not familiar with Panel Syndicate, I encourage you to go check it out. I will include a link in the show notes. And I will say Mr. Ferber and the art team on here have 2 issues of Glacier City. And there's a bunch of other books as well by other creators. So go check that out. Anyway, so I gladly forked over a few dollars for this issue, and also gave them a little bit more because I felt like I didn't give them enough for issue number 1 the first time. So anyway, it's just generally speaking, it's about a cop. I wrote in my notes Alaska, but I honestly don't remember if that's true. I think it is. Anyway, the cop is dealing with local criminals and organized crime moving into his neck of the woods, and some personal relationships that are very interesting. What's interesting about it, though, in terms of the layout of the book, is that it's told in landscape form. So the pages are in landscape, not portrait, which was typical for a comic book, of course. So I'm not sure though what advantage telling the story in this way, what that brings to the reading experience, other than when you're like I do, I read on my tablet, and so the panels are ostensibly wider than if you were reading it in portrait format. Now, of course, you can zoom in just like you can with any other digital comic book, and I guess depending on your reader, you can zoom in, and read it panel by panel, I suppose. And that's the other thing about the Panel Syndicate stuff. I think you can. Well, I downloaded them as PDFs. I think maybe you can also get them as CBR files or CBZ files. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, I quite enjoy this. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Mr. Ferber's. I have, I think, almost everything he's ever had published. And I keep threatening to do this, but one of these days I'm going to do a spotlight on his work. But consider this a little preview, if you will, of his work. All right, I'm going to move on to a Marvel comic. This is Strange #1. I have not read much Doctor Strange comics besides his appearances in, for example, New Avengers. Also, the Mark Waid written series from, I think, a few years ago. And then there was the recent Defenders. Oh boy, I've forgotten. I just talked about this too. I forgot what that miniseries is called. But anyway, which that was great. If you have not listened to that last Polis review. And I know even less of the character Clea, except as, I know she's a supporting character in Doctor Strange's stories. And apparently they're married. And but I've not read a whole lot with her. And so I really don't know this character. And so that's what kind of pulled me into this. And of course, along with a beautiful cover by Bjorn Behrens. Anyway, I contemplated actually buying the single issues of this, at least, the first few. But then as I often do, I look at the DC and Marvel offerings and go, you know what? I pay for the subscription to their digital comic service, so why not just wait and read it there? And I could always get the collection if I want. So that's what I did. But I have to say, I really enjoyed this. It has her taking over as Sorcerer Supreme. And I thought, when I was contemplating buying this, and then, of course, then just waiting to read it on the Marvel app, I thought it might give me that same thrill that I had when I read the Thor books, Thor, Mighty Thor, that was the Jane Foster Valkyrie. Anyway, when Jane Foster took over as Thor, that was a phenomenal run, focusing on the the quote unquote girlfriend of the hero, and her taking over the mantle, which was just awesome. That was an incredible run, like I said. And so I was wondering if I was going to get the same kind of vibe, I guess, with Clea taking over as Sorcerer Supreme. And what I discovered is that I love how badass Clea really is. She takes no guff. She's aggressive in her use of magic, and she also is really determined. That's the word I was trying to think of. Because she doesn't believe that Doctor Strange is dead, and so she's trying to find him and bring him back. So I just really like that aspect of this character. So I'm looking forward to reading issue 2 and on to see where this story and this character ends up. Because eventually Strange will return. Doctor Strange will return. So is this all we're going to get from Clea? Is she going to even when Doctor Strange returns, is she going to have a more prominent role in his stories? I don't know. So we'll see. All right, from one female character at Marvel to one at DC, possibly or arguably the most important female character at DC Comics, Wonder Woman. This is Wonder Woman Historia #1. So last year I read Snow Glass Apples and thought that was the most beautiful comic book I'd ever read. And then I read Wonder Woman Historia, and unfortunately, I read it on my tablet through the DCU app because I stupidly did not order this issue drawn by Phil Jimenez. I am so dumb because even though I read it on the tablet, I was in awe. It is the most beautiful comic book I have ever read. So much on the page, so many different things going on. There are page spans and background details, and this is probably the most George Peresian that Phil Jimenez has ever been. But then it's obviously his take, his vision, as helped by Kelly Sue DeConnick's story. I need to read this in physical form. I had decided I was going to wait for the collection for I guess, is it 3 issues, I think, total? This is one of the Black Label books. It's already oversized. I think if DC does not decide to put out like a deluxe edition, or I don't know, deluxe isn't bigger than Black Label is. I don't know what the dimensions are. They need to put out a bigger size version, that's an absolute or something, because oh my God, this is so incredibly wonderful to look at. I guess the only advantage I have having read it on my tablet is that I can zoom in on the panels and see things that would, with my old eyes now, would be much more difficult. This, you got to read this. It's not even, I wouldn't even say necessarily for the narrative of this comic book, but just the visuals, the visual storytelling. Phil Jimenez he is painting on, figuratively, maybe literally, on the canvas that is the comic book page, and it is the most wonderful thing to look at. So please, please go read this. And if anyone has access to a copy of the cover, the Phil Jimenez cover, because I know that there's a variant cover out there, but I want the Jimenez one. Please let me know. I would be eternally grateful if I could somehow get a copy of that. All right, so back to Marvel, I guess. The Marvel's number 10. So let's see here. I only included this really because it's a fine enough series. I've enjoyed it. Kurt Busiek's and Ildare Sinar's story here, but I don't know. It's not catching fire, as it were. I guess that's not even the right phrase I want to use. Anyway, it's not setting the comic book world. That's what I was trying to go for. Certainly not really making me excited. I'm enjoying it, but at the end of issue number 10. The heroes gather in this other dimensional plane where there is a comic book shop, and it is called Journey into Mystery Comics, and it has the Journey into Mystery logo outside the building, and then they walk in, and it is a comic book shop. It is probably one of the cleanest and most organized comic book shops I've ever seen. But comics are everywhere. You can actually see the covers to some of these issues clearly. There are some posters on the wall, and the posters on the wall are covers, I believe, featuring Night Nurse, Black Goliath, I believe, and some others that I can't quite make out. This is why I need to read it on the app so I can zoom in and try and discern those. But anyway, there's also a life-size cardboard standee of Jack of Hearts, and there's also, I believe, there's a half-size version of Brother Voodoo. So I love it when artists have fun like that, and they take liberties, and they just, I don't know. To me, I read that as Sinar just going to town. However, I was curious, was this scene and all those the details that I just told you about, did that come from the artist, or did Busiek provide or tell Sinar, hey, it'd be really cool if you could include X, Y, and Z specifically? Anyway, so I've already made comments about how much I like this scene on Twitter, and I tagged both Busiek and Sinar in the photo on that, and then Busiek responded, which I thought was really cool. Anyway, he did tell me that it was Sinar, quote, who went nuts on it and made the scene really come alive. And apparently Sonar is also a huge Jack of Hearts fan, which is why I included that character for that standee. So just really cool that scene. I'm not sure. When I get to reading issue number 12, which I believe is in my to read pile right now, but the series, like I said, hasn't been all that exciting for me. But for little things like that, I give it a tip of the hat. Okay, let's move out of DC Marvel land for a little while. Something is Killing the Children, Volume 4. Like I said, issues 16 through 20. This is the story I've been waiting for since issue number 1. It's the origin of Erica Slaughter as a monster hunter. What I find interesting about this series is how engaging, the series, but especially this volume, is how engaging some of the side characters are compared to the main one, Erica. I guess I'm just not that into her as compared to, for example, her mentor, Jessica, that there's some scenes, flashback scenes or mentions of her in volume 1, as I recall. But here we get to see Jessica encountering Erica for the first time and bringing Erica into the House of Slaughter. Aaron, her brother and sort of rival, whom we did see in volume, I think near the end of volume 1, and then also in volume 2. And something happens to Aaron in volume, I forget, but in there, in between volume 1 and 2, somewhere in there, which is unfortunate. And then in this volume, Jesse, who is the guy who tests initiates like Erica. Speaking of Erica's test in this book, so okay, let me back up. So Erica somehow traps the monster that slaughters her family. Jessica arrives and finishes the monster off, but it was mostly Erica, so she decides to bring Erica into the House of Slaughter. But it's not that simple. These people that the monster hunters bring in, there's protocols which Jessica likes to, in a very Captain Kirk-like fashion, flaunt or bend the rules to suit her purposes, her needs. But anyway, but they take Erica to this. I'm gonna call it the farm because I don't remember exactly if they actually named it, or I don't know. Anyway, it reminds me of like a farm type situation. And Jesse is there to basically put Erica in a situation where she has to deal with a monster and basically not die. And that's the test. If you don't die, you become part of the House of Slaughter, I guess. But it reminded me a lot of the Buffy, the Vampire Slayer episode, Helpless, where the Watchers Council does the same thing to Buffy. Anyway, my issue with this scene, or this set of scenes in these issues, the test itself doesn't seem arduous enough. Erica seems to, spoilers possibly if you're, well, I guess it's already spoiled with issue number 1. But anyway, she passes the test, but it doesn't seem to, I don't know, it didn't seem like she was challenged enough with it, I guess. Or maybe that's a testament to her innate abilities, which is how she survived the monster that killed her family in the first place. I wasn't quite sure how I was supposed to read that particular scene with a monster. All I know is it seemed to be a little too quick, a little too easy. But that may say more about my interpretation than the actual, what's on the page of the story itself. Regardless, I'm here for the next volume. I continue to enjoy this series, even though it still comes across a little light to me in terms of especially characterization. And I like the world building. Again, also, we get it in tiny drips and drabs. What I am concerned about is that the next volume will be just basically a wash, rinse, repeat of the first 3 volumes. So I guess we'll see. We'll find out. Okay, I have a short OGN called The Case of Alan Turing This was a book that was sent to me by the wonderful Christopher Calloway from the now defunct Creator Talks podcast. And Chris did this podcast. He, like I said, it's defunct now. He's not putting out any more new episodes. However, I believe it's still available. And if it's the first time you've heard of this podcast or heard me talk about this podcast, it was my favorite comic book creator interview show. And because Chris did a wonderful job of interviewing. So anyway, go listen to Chris's podcast. I'm sure you'll find a creator interview that you will enjoy. I guarantee it. So I will include a link to the Creator Talks feed in the show notes. However, like I said, Chris sent me this book, I believe near the end of last year, and it's taken me almost another year to read it. But that's how it is when I have several hundred books in my collection still to read. But I really enjoyed this book. I wanted to read it because I saw the movie about Alan Turing starring Benedict Cumberbatch a while ago. And I pulled it out specifically in June because that was Pride Month. And Turing was homosexual. And so this book deals a lot with what he dealt with as a gay man in the 40s and 50s. And it also deals with much of what the movie told us about cracking the code cracking that he and the team worked on in order to, what was it, to crack the Enigma machine? Is that the right term for that? So that they could listen in on the Nazis' communications. So anyway, really a wonderful story examining that. I actually, if I have any critique about it, it is that I wish they would have spent less time on the code cracking stuff, the mathematics and the challenges they had with that, and more about how Mr. Turing, how he was dealing with his guilt, his shame, and his innate feelings for other men. I think there's more to tell about that, and more to say about that situation. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's an oversized book, lots of wonderful illustrations by the artist, and that is Eric Liberge. My French is not good. But yeah, a really good book. I encourage you, if you're interested in that kind of story or that person, Alan Turing, check this book out. Next up is a new book, so to speak. And so I made a comment earlier when I was listing all the books. So Spectators is a digital comic book from the Exploding Giraffe, which is a great name, I have to say. Substack by Brian K. Vaughan and Nico Henriksen. Henriksen. I don't know how to say it. So I actually, this is kind of a cheat. I actually read that back in April, but I forgot to include it in my April 2022 pull list review. So I'm including it now. This is a planned 300 plus. This is according to the Exploding Giraffe, and I just like saying those two words. Substack, 300 plus page self-contained epic about, quote, I believe this is from Brian K. Vaughan. Well, a lot of things, but at its core, it's a story about sex and violence and why so many of us spend so much of our lives watching both. So they are releasing this story 3 pages at a time for free. You just have to subscribe to their Substack, their Exploding Giraffe Substack. And then occasionally, and this has happened twice so far, they collect those 3 pages as a 27-page comic. And like I said, I read the first one in April. I've already read the second one. I'll talk about that next. Oh, it depends. No, I think I will. That might go on the list for the next pull list review. And so this first issue, and I put that in quotes because it's Well, you have to remember, like I said, it's supposed to be a 300 plus page epic, right? So while they're releasing it in this format, the number of pages by which they're releasing this, the first 27 page, I would say it doesn't end like I would expect a first issue comic book to end. It just kind of ends with the appearance of a character after this traumatic event. And I guess that's an ending. That's a page turner. That's a cliffhanger ending, I guess. But so a little weird, I have to say. However, like I said, this is so anyway, what this is about is it introduces us to the character Val, the main character, although she isn't named until the next 27-page collection, as well as the other character that Val encounters near the end of the issue. So that's also odd. So that's why I'm thinking it's, even though they're releasing these as chunks, it's really not meant to be read as single issues per se. So keep that in mind if you go check this out. Anyway, so Val is in a movie theater. She's waiting for this person. They're supposed to have this second date, I think. And this person is blowing her off because of work, I guess. But then what happens is a spree killer comes in and starts shooting everybody. Yeah, and of course, spoilers abound here. So, but it's less about the plot points than it is about what Val is going through. So, she is killed, and she becomes a ghost. And like I said, by the end of the issue, she encounters this other character, Lita, who is also a ghost, a naked ghost. She's wearing one stocking on one of her legs, and that's it. Anyway, so they have this conversation, which I won't go into detail about, but it is briefly about. Well, it's more of an implication of stuff that we actually get more explicitly in issue number 2. So, like I said, Lita is starting to give Val the 411 on the situation. So anyway, that's kind of how the issue ends. What I really like about this, besides the idea of, like Mr. Vaughn says, a story about sex and violence and why we spend so much of our lives watching both. So it's about our enjoyment of sex and violence. It's about our voyeurism, because there's a scene in which Val is watching porn on her phone after the person who blows her off for the date. Apparently, she wasn't into the movie so much, and then we find out again. This is all stuff that comes in the second collection or the second issue. But anyway, that the ghosts they watch the living, and they have their own groups. For example, Lita is part of a group, a true crime fan group, and they watch things like this spree killer that murdered Val. And then Val in the second issue, I'm really screwing. I wasn't going to talk about the second issue until the next Bullis review, but it's kind of important, I guess. Val ends up in the second issue, I guess. I'm not sure if she's becoming a part of that group or she just encounters them. But there's another group, and they watch these fighters, these kind of like MMA fighter. Is that right? MMA? Am I saying the right thing? Fighters. Anyway, so that's kind of the setup for the first 2 issues, so to speak. But anyway, what I really like about I'll just say the Nico art is that what they decided to do. So Nico's art is kind of sketch-like art, but what was really neat about it is that the first part of it, when Val is still alive, it's all in color, and then when she dies, we see her character in color, but everything around her, until she encounters Lita, is grayscale. And that's how these first, 27 plus 27 is 54 pages. Did I do the math right? Anyway, that's how it is. The ghosts are in color. The living world is black and white. And I thought that was a really cool design choice. So the next 2 issues that I'm going to talk about, and really just one of those, is Jones #1 and Hit Me #1 from AWA Upshot. And these are kind of weird because I did not order these. I remember seeing these solicitations in previews before. I may have even talked about Jones, perhaps, but these were sent to me in my DCBS order for free in 2 different shipments. So I actually have 2 copies of both Jones and Hit Me #1. So if anybody's interested in those, let me know. I might be able to send you a copy of each. But I read both of these, of course. And Jones #1, I'll just say very quickly, I just saw the collection in the latest previews, and I probably will be getting that because it's a story about a superhero family trying to use their powers in secret in a world where superpowered people are not welcome. That people don't want them. They're considered to be dangerous, which, that's a great take on superhero, or I shouldn't say superheroes, superpowered beings. Because we would not want them in our world, really. Probably not. Anyway, so there's that. But it was the comic book Hit Me that I found much more compelling story-wise because it features a character, Lulu, who gets paid to take beatings. And that's not something that you normally read in a comic book. At least not as the main part of the story, not the main character. Yeah, that concept of this woman who gets paid to be beaten up, and it's usually within a sexual context as well. So that's very unusual for a comic book. And in the back of this first issue is a letter from Krista Faust, who is the writer of this. And Priscilla Petrades is the artist. But anyway, I wanted to read a little bit of this letter from Krista Faust. Before we even started on this project, I knew that Hit Me was going to be a challenging read for many people. People who aren't familiar with real BDSM dynamics, which I'm not, and the complex, nuanced realities of sex work. People who have only ever seen sex workers portrayed as victims, lost lambs, or pretty corpses that allow men to feel important, manly feelings. People whose ideas about kink come from the cultural ubiquity of 50 Shades of Grey. I wrote this series primarily because I wanted to center the authentic and unvarnished voices of sex workers and lifestyle perverts like me, and the women I've known and loved over decades of both private and professional participation in the BDSM scene. I am inspired by and in awe of these women. They are some of the strongest women I know. And she goes on for much more than that, but I find this story very interesting. I wasn't too keen on it when I was first reading it because I was challenged. The idea of a woman who is okay with being hit and bruised and essentially assaulted for money. What? But this is a very, like I said, I keep saying the word interesting. I got to come up with a better word. I find it very compelling, and I want to read more. So I will be picking up the trade collection of this, I'm sure. All right, real quick, the Earth 1 series, I read Wonder Woman Volume 3, Batman Volume 3, and Green Lantern Volume 2. I've had these on my shelves for a while. It's been so long since I read the previous volumes of these books. There were plot points I couldn't remember. So maybe something was lost because of that in my enjoyment of these books. But I didn't really care for the Batman and Green Lantern books, especially. I don't know. It's a kind of a toss-up between the two, which one I enjoy the least. They're fine stories. I just wasn't engaged with them. Wonder Woman, however, I was. It was interesting from a character and theme standpoint, and not to mention the Yannick Paquette art. Paquette really played around with the panel shapes and sizes in ways that I found interesting, and it wasn't a uniform style that he portrayed on the page. He would mix it up, and it just visually how you read the book is a little different, and I like that. And then of course it's Grant Morrison exploring themes of continuing to explore those original ideas about Wonder Woman, about loving submission and a matriarchal society and whatnot. So those just really interesting ideas told in the form of Wonder Woman and beautifully drawn by Paquette as well. So if you've not read any of the Earth One books, and there's also Teen Titans, I believe. It's Teen Titans, right? Earth One, I think those are the only 4. Oh, no, Superman. There's also the Superman books, which I actually quite enjoyed. Out of all those, I would say definitely read the Wonder Woman books. So there you go. All right. Just a few more here. Dark Crisis #1. I've already mentioned how, what was it? Infinite Frontier and Justice League Incarnate. I believe I've talked about those. And my growing, not disappointment, concern, dissatisfaction. Anyway, so those things lead into Dark Crisis. And so I was a little trepidatious, a little leery about what we were going to get, but based on the solicitations for Dark Crisis, I was a little excited to read it because I felt like it was going to focus on and maybe explore, the second generation of heroes, the legacy characters, Dick Grayson, the Titans, others, filling the void because of the death of the main Justice League members. And so I also got one of the variant covers by Bruno Redondo featuring Nightwing. So, I got that at least. But unfortunately, I was a little disappointed in Dark Crisis #1. I mean, there was a neat scene with Nightwing stepping into the spotlight, stepping into the role of leader to help comfort those who feel the loss of the Justice League, who are frightened about the situation. And then I think was it this issue? Because I've already read issue #2, and I'm kind of getting them conflated in my mind. But I think there's a villain attack. Anyway, I've read this before. I've read similar things like this. And if this is because they just announced at San Diego Comic-Con that Dark Crisis is it's really, folks, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. So it is they're calling it a direct sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I don't see it. At least in the first 2 issues, I don't see this being a direct sequel. So your mileage may vary. You may disagree with me, but I'm not feeling any spark from this so far, especially with issue 1. I don't feel there's a cool or interesting hook or angle to it yet. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. I'm committed to buying. Is it 6 issues? I hope it's just 6 issues. I'm committed to buying those to see where it leads and what happens with these characters. But, my guess is we're going to get a status quo, a return to status quo. And all this hubbub, this excitement I may have had initially for characters like Nightwing and the Titans and other second generation legacy characters. I know I don't think they're going to do anything with that. So. Okay, next to last is the penultimate. I just like saying that word. Penultimate title in my pull list review today is Sandman Mystery Theater. Sandman Mystery Theater numbers 29 through 32. I bought these issues specifically. I sought these out. I mean, I've been wanting to read this title for a long time because for years I've heard how good it is. I think I still have, but I definitely read the first trade collection of this, and I remember thinking I need to get back to this and buy the trades. Well, I can't find them anymore except real expensively. So I think I read that they're coming out with, or someone told me that they're coming out with an omnibus or I don't know, some sort of collection giving me more issues. So I will most likely I will be getting that because if I remember correctly right now, it's not on the DCU app, that title. Anyway, that was a long aside, but I got these issues because I found out that Rick Tyler, the Hour Man, guest stars in this 4-part story. Unfortunately, he's not really in it that much, especially as Hour Man. And so the reason I did that is because Hour Man's one of my favorite Golden Age characters, and I wanted to see what this series came out in I want to say the 90s. Is that right? And I wanted to see what the golden age version of that character as told in the 90s was like. And so I enjoyed the story. It was fine. It mostly focused on, of course, the star of the book, Wesley Dodds, the Sandman. But it was really and interestingly and surprisingly more about his relationship with his girlfriend, Diane Belmont. And I enjoyed this story more for her than the lead character. Every scene she was in was compelling and interesting, and I wanted to know more about her viewpoint. I didn't really care what Wesley was going through and what, the quote unquote plot of the story. She was just, she's a bit of a firecracker. She's way ahead of her time in terms of her attitude. But I don't know. She just seems she's a very independent minded, and she's strong willed. Not to say that women weren't like that back then or any time, but I guess maybe she's supposed to be that way, and men expect her to be that way, and she's not, and she doesn't care. I love that. And she is the, I want to say, maybe this is not the right term to use either, but she's the alpha of this relationship. And I want to read more about her now, as opposed to either Wesley Dodds or Rick Tyler. All right, finally, Chivalry by Neil Gaiman. But really, but let's be honest, this is by Colleen Doran. It's based on a short story, I believe, or a poem. I forget. By Gaiman, but this is Colleen Doran's vehicle. This is her creation, as far as I'm concerned. So after reading one of their previous collaborations, Snow Glass Apples, which as I said was, well, I said that Wonder Woman Historia is the most beautiful comic book, but man, thinking about it's between Snow Glass Apples and Wonder Woman Historia right now. So anyway, like I said, I read Snow Glass Apples. I saw Chivalry being solicited, and it was an instant buy. I knew I had to get it. The story itself is, kind of a simple. If you've read any of Neil Gaiman's short stories, it's simply told. It's about a woman who discovers who buys in a knick-knack shop the Holy Grail, and there's also a bunch of other unrealized treasures in this place as well. But she ends up taking the Grail home because she thinks it would look nice on her mantle. And then a medieval knight shows up, wanting to take the Grail, and he offers her all these different things in trade. And that's really the story. And I won't spoil the ending for you, but it's like I said, it's Colleen Doran's book, and it is beautiful. It has a watercolor painterly style to it. There's also a bunch of pages that look like illuminated manuscripts from medieval times in there. Just it's so beautiful. There's a couple pages of the knight offering the woman this egg, and what this egg is a phoenix egg, and so we're seeing a description of what will happen, or what the phoenix will look like, and it's just beautiful. And there's one of the apples of the, I'm going to say this wrong, but Hesperides, I'm not sure. Where we see this knight battling it looks like a hydra. It's just these 2-page spreads that Doran has in here. There's that apple. If you take 3 bites, basically you live forever. But one of the bites is you regain your youth, and we see the woman portrayed in her youth, and you get to see through all these little sub panels in these portrait pages what her life might have been, or like it was. And so I guess it's more of a memory of her, what she went through with her husband when she was younger. It's just beautiful. And like I said, you have those illuminated manuscript pages, which is a wonderful addition to this because it's the title is Chivalry. It's about this medieval knight, partly about this medieval knight and whatnot. So it is gorgeous. It's gorgeous in a different way than Snow Glass Apples, which I much prefer that art and content, I guess, than I do this. But this is a really close second of the Duran Gaiman collaborations. So think of this as maybe a fairy tale / children's book for adults. And this is something you could read to probably a slightly older young child. That made no sense whatsoever. Someone who 8, 10, 12, something like that. Let alone yourself. Share it with other adults. So, but very, very well done graphic novel, and so pick that up if you haven't, because it's a wonderful, wonderful book. So, all right, that's all I have for you for the books that I read for in June of 2022. Send me feedback via email at longboxreview@gmail.com. Send me text or voicemail at 208-953-1841. And you can also chat with me on social media at Longbox Review, all one word. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.